after all we've been through. Everything I've done. It can't be for nothing. I know you mean well. I know you want to protect me. You have. And when we're done, we'll go wherever you want. Calme's, Sheep Ranch, the moon. I'll follow you anywhere you go.
So, The Last of Us Season 1 concludes with a hell of an episode. The shortest episode of the series, some might argue it was rushed. I personally think it was perfectly paced and concise and delivered absolutely everything it needed to. Well, almost everything. I would have liked to have seen Sarah's photograph, even if I do actually prefer what they did in its place here, and I think it's fair when people say there haven't been enough infected this series. I don't mind at all when people say about the lack of action, but I do think we lose some of the sense of threat the infected carry when we haven't seen them really much for so long. Either way, I think it's a brilliant episode, and there is a lot of big stuff we need to talk about. Spoilers for episode 9, that's important to say, but otherwise let's just get going. So before we talk about the massive moral dilemma here and some of the layers to it that I don't think people often notice, we first need to look at Ellie, who is not in a good place here. Last week she was put through traumatic events, and I need to emphasise this again, just because she was able to stop David and fight her way free doesn't make it any less traumatic. I think people often look at that event as like some positive story of growth for how Ellie is able to fight and survive on her own, and yes, that's sort of true. However, it doesn't remove the trauma that is going to have an effect on her. Too often TV does this weird thing of glorifying trauma into some positive rite of passage that characters need to go through to become better, and that they're then thankful for the experience, and that's just not a good message. One, fortunately, that this show does not subscribe to, which is great, and this episode, in a very simple, concise way, we see her ongoing pain. It doesn't require mass dramatisation or flashbacks, because we know what Ellie's been through, just having her a bit quiet and not quite following things. I think it's all a great depiction, and it leaves Joel the one now who's talking a lot. His slight unease, because he knows she's struggling and he wants to make it better, but he doesn't know how. Should he try talking about what happened, or would that be the worst thing to do? Should he try cheering her up? He rambles on about guitar and Boggle and feels like he's not quite getting it right. And ultimately he can't get it right. There's no simple thing he can do to make it better. He's not supposed to. He cannot save Ellie from all despair. All he can do is support her. Be with her, be patient, understanding. I think we can empathise with his unease, and also, yeah, he does a pretty good job here, I think. He wants to cheer her up, which can be good, but he's also not so forceful in cheeriness that it then means she has no room for her feelings. He invites her to open up, but he also doesn't push her, and he understands she might need time. And Ellie is still Ellie, you know? She's going through a lot, but she can still joke and laugh and cherish the moment with the giraffes, for example. That's one of my favourite moments from the game, and I'm glad to see it return here. A moment that symbolises hope, really. Yes, she's been through a lot. Both of them have. Humanity has. But there is still hope. There is a point to me saying all this, which is how directly relevant this all is to the big moral dilemma we get this episode, and to their character arcs as a whole. Joel cannot save Ellie from her despair, but he can support her. Throughout this show, we have seen him change from an out-and-out protector and saver, who doesn't want her holding a gun, who wants her to follow his every command, who feels like he's failed when she does have to shoot someone. We've seen him change from that into someone who lets her have more agency, who gives her a gun, teaches her how to hunt and how to keep watch, and eventually to fend for the two of them when he is wounded. Although the circumstances are strange, that seems like a clear arc here of a parent increasingly trusting their child to grow. Until this episode, things now get flipped on their heads. Let's discuss that after this wonderful bit.
Gotta see this!
This video is sponsored by World Anvil. World Anvil is an online tool for world building, campaign building, character creation, management, good for writers, game masters and participants of said games, from Dungeons and Dragons to all these other ones I haven't heard of. Oh, I do know some of them actually, but I said world building can feel daunting when there's so much to do. World Anvil makes a massive difference, giving you all the tools and features you could possibly need. A lot of different features. The one I find the most fun though is their Chronicles feature. Say you want to design your own calendar for your world. You can pop in all the information, have the calendar generated, then build a timeline of historical events linked to that calendar, or several calendars with all sorts of hyperlinks you might want sprawling to other articles, and then upload a map and link different events to locations on the map so you can easily see where and when everything happened. I find that so handy, and if the timeline affects how the map looks, such as a big city getting destroyed or whatever else, you can add altered maps to reflect those changes. Plus, you can have different timelines running together. There are other features to World Anvil too. I just get a bit excited about that one specifically because my organisation is chaotic at best, and a good 5 years ago I tried to plot out this stuff with my own calendar and timelines for my novel on paper, and I got in a complete muddle, and something like this is just perfect for me. I have a link in the description and as a pinned comment with the code TREE, which offers you 40% off all their subscriptions. There are different levels and you can even try out the free version initially, so give it a whirl. Take it for a test drive. World Anvil. This might sound a little critical of Joel initially, but bear with me for it, okay, because it's not meant to be. I've mentioned this arc of Joel changing from protector or bodyguard into a parent, except then the one time Ellie does have to fend for the two of them, she gets put through her worst experiences yet. And it does seem Joel feels a little guilty about that, like that was another of his failures. If he hadn't have gotten wounded, or if he had somehow still forced himself to go out and do all of the hunting, none of this would have happened to Ellie. And secondly, that if he had just reached her a bit quicker, he could have saved her from David. Ellie is, of course, able to save herself, and that's massively to her credit. There is a positive in that, but it is still incredibly traumatic as well, and this side of Joel that has wanted to protect her, who is still burdened with the feeling that he has failed Sarah, that side of him just would feel guilty, which suggests two things. One, I shouldn't have been giving her control. I should be an out-and-out protector, because when I didn't do that, it resulted in horror for her. Two, I moved heaven and earth to reach her, and I still failed to get there quick enough. I cannot make that same mistake again. I will not fail again. Next time she needs saving, I will not let anything stop me or slow me down. And so, right at the last moment, his whole arc this series suddenly flips on its head, and he charges off to be the total protector. So much so that he takes away all of her agency and decision making here, and we end up with something faintly like a reverse to Bill and Frank. Frank choosing to die, and Bill, despite not wanting to lose him, choosing to accept that decision. Does that mean Joel was bad and did the wrong thing? No. To be honest, I'm not even sure what I think about this yet. However, it is important to note the twist we get here directly twists his entire arc. It's not just a plot twist, but a character twist, I guess, which embeds it much deeper into the story, and I think is a big reason it feels so impactful. Joel goes on a big killing spree to stop the Fireflies from performing surgery on Ellie when he learns that the surgery needed to obtain a cure would kill her. His motivations are love and care and wanting to save his new daughter. However, we also have to recognise his own inner feelings of failure. They are a very important factor that people seem to overlook. This side of him that still feels like he failed Sarah, that hasn't come to terms with it, that feels like he failed Ellie last episode and cannot afford to suffer the guilt of going through that all again. It's both that he can't bear to lose Ellie and he can't bear to feel like he failed Ellie. I think that point does matter. And what it all makes for is this wonderful paradox. On the one hand, Joel being kind of heroic, who suffered this pain of not saving Sarah, and then goes through this journey and this time does save Ellie. In any other story, that would have been an arc of real heroic growth and of resolving his inner pains, but here it's set against the massive moral complications that undermine it. Plus, it feels less like this is an act of overcoming and resolving his grief than of being chained to it. So this is kind of both those things feelings, and I think that makes it such a fascinating arc for a character. I love it. This is the thing though, there's still more to it than that. There's also Marlene and Ellie herself, which is where we'll get to another side of this that I think is often overlooked. So let's do that now. The whole backstory with Ellie's mum, Anne, who also seems to have an oddly familiar voice, can't think why, that is a perfect addition which just cements her perspective, I think. It's really hard of a choice for Marlene too, who does make a compelling argument. This is about saving the world, the one person who can cure this infection, the one thing that would turn the Fireflies into a genuine force for good rather than just, a word beginning with terror that YouTube doesn't like me saying. Ellie would die, but it would be worth something. Except, as Joel says,
it isn't for you to decide.
Her counter is that it's not for Joel to decide either, that Ellie really would want to give her life for the sake of a cure. And Marlene is right, Ellie would want to, but Marlene doesn't actually know that because she didn't ask Ellie, she didn't explain it to her. To be honest, she doesn't even know Ellie all that well, which makes this interesting, I think. Marlene doesn't want to know what Ellie wants to do, so proceeds with surgery without asking her, whereas Joel does know what Ellie wants to do, but chooses to go against it. And it did a good job of showing Joel is conflicted about this, I should say. Anyway, it leaves all of this feeling like two parents fighting over a child without actually giving the kids a say in a matter, and I think that similarity is deliberate. If Ellie did have a say, I'm almost 100% certain she would choose to give her life. Riley gave her life. Sam and Henry gave their lives. Tess did. All good people who died where Ellie got to live. Does that leave her with feelings of survivor's guilt? In Tess's case, she died specifically so that Ellie could reach the Fireflies and make a cure. For Ellie to then not do that would feel like a betrayal of Tess's life. As she says,
It can't be for nothing.
all of which just reminds you how much weight Ellie has been carrying on her shoulders this entire time. It's phenomenal. I guess the next layer of moral complexity that comes in here is whether or not Ellie is thinking straight, whether or not it's too big a decision for someone her age. I imagine Joel might make that argument. After all, had all these people not died for a cause Ellie did not ask them to die for, had none of them died, had Ellie not been left with survivor's guilt, would she still decide to give her life for the possibility of a cure? That's an interesting question to wonder about. Not one I'm going to give my answer to because I think it's better I just leave it open for you. It's been years since I played the game, and as it turns out I completely remembered the ending entirely wrong, so I watched back some clips from the game and found that in the game you can find evidence that suggests the cure might not be possible, that there had in fact been dozens like Ellie who were immune, who lost their lives under surgery, and it still didn't produce a cure. What's to say the same wouldn't happen to Ellie? I think it does then take something away from the story when they leave that out of the show here. However, in its place I think we get this other idea. The reason Ellie is immune is that her mother was bitten just before giving birth. That does then leave you wondering, well, surely they can replicate that situation again, produce another baby that could grow up similarly immune, then try to extract a cure from that child. That's a very different complication to throw into the mix, and yes, it means someone else would have to give their life in Ellie's place, but it also means Joel hasn't necessarily doomed humanity here, the way it can be suggested. This wasn't their one and only shot. They can get other immune people. But I'm now just getting lost presenting different sides of an argument when it wasn't really what I wanted to do. My point was, if part of Joel's motivation to save Ellie was guilt about failing Sarah, part of Ellie's motivation to create a cure is guilt over the loss of Tess and Riley and Sam and Henry and almost Joel. Although again, she wasn't actually given the choice here. There's one more thing we need to mention before finishing, perhaps the most important thing. Regardless of rights and wrongs, we get a scene in which Joel goes through a hospital with a gun and kills everybody in sight. That's pretty horrible. I think there's a deliberate parallel to real life, which reminds us, despite our empathy for Joel, what he does here to all of these people is awful. It's awful. I really like the way the scene is done. You know, I've heard people wishing it was longer with more action, but when this isn't a video game and you can't be in their shoes making these decisions, I think it would remove the weight of what's happening. Instead, we get the sound half muffled in place of dark music, we get slow, dare I say it, villainous shots of Joel's feet, and there's a total dark numbness that the scene needs. All of these people, all of their lives mean absolutely nothing to Joel right now. All that matters is Ellie. They make that the focus of this scene, and I think they're entirely right to. And then when he does save her, he has to lie to her. Fireflies tried to extract a cure, but it didn't work. They had to rush out and escape because of a raider's attack. For Ellie, this cure had become her purpose. Why did she get to live where so many became infected? It had to mean something. This was her superpower, the hope for the entire world, and then just suddenly she's waking up in a car and it's all gone. Joel tells her,
"But if you just keep going, you find something new to fight for."
It took Joel a good 20 years to find something new to fight for, and Ellie, for good or bad, he just took away the very thing she was fighting for, snatched it from her while she slept, which is a hell of a thing to do when you think of it like that. Sometimes, regardless of the rights and wrongs of morality, there are consequences. Sometimes that's just unavoidable, and a consequence here, even if you feel Joel did the right thing, is that Ellie might not be able to forgive him if she finds out. In fact, his lie would probably make it even worse. The consequences are that in order to save her life, he may have to live with her being angry at him, hating him for it maybe, possibly rejecting or leaving him. I honestly have no idea what happens next season. I never played the second game because it was released at a time in my life where I no longer had the same free time for gaming. And I know next to nothing about the story there, but surely this is a massive point. Surely that transcends the rights and wrongs. Ellie will feel betrayed by the only person she ever trusted, just as Maria warned.
The only people who can betray us are the ones we trust.
So I think this show masterfully flips an entire character arc at the last moment, and also somewhat turns the whole theme upside down. A story about how important love and close bonds are in a world where humanity can be awful. Suddenly there's this wedge between their close bond. And there's a lot we can make of that, but I also think it's better if I wait to see how it develops in season 2. There is a lot more I want to say about this show. I want to talk more about people's criticisms about the lack of infected, because I don't think it's as clear cut as people suggest. I want to talk about the suggestions people make about certain episodes being filler. I want to talk about some of the more general points I never covered in my videos on the show. You know, look out for that, another big video when the whole season wrap up. Also look out tomorrow for a live stream, sometime around 3 to 4 PM onwards. I don't know how long it will last. It was originally going to be part of a fundraiser for surgery for our pet rabbit Lennon, but it seems you've already helped me solve that problem beautifully. So instead I'm going to do a live stream to say thank you, and I'm going to read some old short stories I wrote years ago and either cringe with embarrassment or be pleasantly surprised. I don't yet know. I'm going to do that, answer some general questions, maybe talk about The Last of Us some more. I'm not yet sure, we'll see what happens. But if you're interested, come on board for that. If you're not, don't worry, obviously. But like this video if you liked it. Comment your thoughts. What did I not mention? What have I missed? What did I get wrong? Support me on Patreon if you fancy doing that, but otherwise, hopefully see you next time. And as ever, a special thank you goes to Luke Hoare, Trichu Kaber, Michael Gallagher, InSquares, Flying Spider, Samara Salsi, Joshua C. Follier, and Jab Bramwell. Thank you.